In this video, I will show you the full battle of the Ukrainian K-2 battalion repelling a major Russian assault. I will leave the details for supporting this battalion specifically below the video. By contributing, you will help Ukraine in its fight for freedom against Russian aggression. You can also just subscribe to the channel for support. I'm Hustler, let's get started. Morning of December 14th, the Russians launched a massive assault on the Ukrainian brigade. When the enemy launched the attack, a reconnaissance drone spotted 6 Russian BM-21 Grad anti-aircraft systems, and Ukrainian drones immediately flew to attack the anti-aircraft systems. The first pilot flew to the Grads and attacked one vehicle. He was immediately followed by another pilot, who also attacked another anti-aircraft launcher. The drone's camera shows evidence that the first missile system is on fire. After that, the Russian assault began, but it wasn't entirely clear if it was a full-scale attack, as only one tank advanced, and it was moving along a route uncharacteristic for an assault. Reconnaissance drone continues to monitor the tank. After that, an MTLB appeared in a different direction, which also raised questions about whether the Russians were planning to assault the Ukrainian positions or not. Launching an assault with just one MTLB would be completely illogical. At that moment, another tank appeared and drove off in the third direction. Here, the Ukrainian military began to realize that the Russians wanted to disperse the firepower of Ukrainian artillery, and now they had to understand where the enemy wanted to strike the hardest. At that point, Russian infantry began to advance toward the Ukrainian positions. The groups consisted of 7 to 10 soldiers each and attacked simultaneously from 3 directions. On another flank, the Russians managed to execute an unexpected maneuver and launched an assault along a route that was not anticipated. This area, with forest belts and ravines, was not a path they had previously used. Numerous FPV drones targeted the tank, and several rounds were fired from handheld grenade launchers, but the enemy tank was heavily fortified. In the end, the Ukrainian military burned it down, but at that time, it was able to get very close to the defensive positions. However, a tank advancing without infantry support is not as threatening. The real question was, where was the infantry? The Russians immediately began to smoke the front line very heavily. The Ukrainian infantry began to hear a very loud hum of equipment, and the K-2 unit began to prepare for a strong attack. Here, Russians break through the Ukrainian forest plantation with a trawl, and then they throw it away because they realize that it will not allow them to go further. The Ukrainian defenders' position was attacked from 5 directions at once. In 3 directions, equipment was used, and infantry ran in the other 2 directions. A Russian tank is firing and is attacked by a Ukrainian kamikaze drone. After being hit, the tank continues to fire, but the shooting is not of high quality because a box welded to the tank's turret does not allow it to turn. It can only shoot straight ahead. The Russians are very familiar with this terrain, as the fight for this area has been ongoing for quite some time. They understand where the Ukrainians can effectively deploy anti-tank weapons and where they cannot, and they skillfully take advantage of this knowledge. We can see that this tank was heavily fortified, making it difficult to destroy with drones. 5 drones had already been used against it, but without success. The Russian tank confidently plowed through trees. As soon as it managed to reach the wooded area, approximately 4 Russian MTLBs emerged and joined the assault. The tank continued to break down trees when the Ukrainian military realized they could not stop the armored vehicles. A Ukrainian armored group moved to meet the Russians. Here we can also see that the MTLB is moving along the route of the tank. And this is the Ukrainian armored group reaching the Russian tank. As soon as they saw the Ukrainian armored vehicles, the Russians turned around and started driving in the opposite direction. While the Ukrainian tank was catching up with the Russian tank, it was also attacked by 4 Russian FPV drones and sustained some damage. On another flank, where the Russians had also managed to breach the tree line, movement began. The Russians advanced using buggies and motorcycles, followed by an MTLB carrying infantry. On the left flank alone, Ukrainian scouts counted about 20 motorcycles and 4 buggies. On another direction, 2 MTLBs were advancing. The enemy used a tactic of attacking from multiple sides, and it was crucial to quickly decide where to direct the drones and where to target with artillery. The soldiers of the K-2 battalion coped with this very well. Kamikaze drones were sent to the MTLB. The drone operator was able to stop the armored personnel carrier, and the infantry began to flee from it. On the other flank, FPV drone pilots also managed to damage a tank. And now the tank crew is forced to abandon it. They began to flee in the direction of Ukrainian infantry. Here, the enemy, who was riding motorcycles, was able to jump into one of the ravines. The Russians took advantage of the peculiarities of the terrain, which is not ordinary at all. The area is hilly. Here is another large movement of equipment, only here there were 7 MTLBs. On the other flank, Russian motorcyclists partially landed in a forested area. Here they were met by Ukrainian infantrymen, where the Russians suffered significant losses. Here, a Ukrainian kamikaze drone damages a Russian armored personnel carrier with infantry. We can see the Russians abandoning the armored vehicles and going to take up positions. Later, Ukrainian drone pilots will burn this MTLB as well. Here is another hit in MTLB. Immediately afterward, 8 motorcycles and 4 Russian buggies were sent to one of the Ukrainian positions. As can be seen from the reconnaissance drone, the Russian group is also accompanied by an FPV drone. The Ukrainian military began to use 152mm howitzer, realizing that drones alone would not be enough to fight back. Ukrainian drone operator delivers a very accurate bomb drop. It is clearly seen that none of the Russian soldiers stop to help their wounded comrade. Russians have a goal and are clearly moving towards it. Every third Russian soldier was equipped with the electronic warfare aircraft and a pump-action shotgun to counter the FPV drones. Here is the same MTLB that had previously been damaged by a drone strike. It's clear that the Russians are unable to steer it and can only move straight ahead, likely because the turning mechanism jammed after the hit. The Russians abandoned their armored vehicle, only to be immediately met by Ukrainian drone operators. This group of Russian soldiers was completely stopped. Another group of Russian infantrymen was forced to make an emergency landing in the middle of the field after a Ukrainian drone attack. A group of 6 infantrymen was also stopped. On the other flank, drone pilots were working against motorcyclists. The pilot sees 3 Russian soldiers on the horizon, and now he has to choose only one. The same drone pilot, but chasing another Russian soldier. After that, the Russian buggies started moving to Ukrainian positions. We are currently observing 2, but 2 more are due to join a little later. There was one direct drone hit, the buggy was stopped. After the K-2 servicemen began inspecting the buggies, they discovered that each one contained several machine guns, a few disposable grenade launchers, and water and eat supplies. This indicated that the Russians had planned to break into Ukrainian positions and immediately establish a foothold there. In some areas, the Russians were able to sit between the Ukrainian positions, but there was an order to stay put and control only their own sector. Those Russians were dealt with by drones and artillery. As we can see, the enemy had nowhere to hide, he just sat down in the middle of the trees. Some Russian infantrymen were stopped by bomb drops. This Russian infantryman pretended to be unarmed, but in the end decided to shoot down the drone. Now we can see a Russian soldier carrying an electronic warfare device. He has just dropped it near his motorcycle because it is an additional weight, about 12 kilograms. Russian tries to shoot down a drone with an assault rifle. Another Russian assault group launches an attack on the right flank. A successful grenade drop on a Russian assault group. And immediately cluster munitions were fired in that direction. It was a Ukrainian FPV drone that tried to attack the Russians, but they fired back and shot down the drone. Here, Ukrainian operators stop an MTLB with Russian infantry. Another drone shows the infantry beginning to retreat. Here we see another group of Russian assault troops advancing. They decided to move across the field, but were spotted in time, and bomber drones targeted them. As a result, the enemy changed their plan and began to retreat. There was a very large number of infantry. They divided into small groups of 3 and attacked from 5 or 7 directions at once. This was a group in which almost all were 300. To avoid further distraction, a vampire drone was deployed to target them, making several bomb drops. That was the end of the Russian assault. Subscribe to the channel for more. This was Hustler. See you soon.